This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Chof Ches. We're holding the very bottom of Chof Zayin and Mebez, and we like to dedicate today's shir and all the shirim for the month of Teves as an incredible Schos Aliyas Neshama for Rabbi Leib and Rabbi Ya'akov V'siyata Dishmaya. The Schos HaTorah should continuously elevate the Neshama of Rabbi Arya Leib and Rabbi Ya'akov to an incredibly higher place in Gan Eden Shel Ma'ila. As well as learning Shabiyah, Schos Refuah Shlema, Mirza Hashem, continued successes and refuah ultimately culminating with a refuah shlema gemura bekarayv for Tinoch ben Miriam Ahuva, and finally today's shir should be Schos Aliyas Neshama for Rab David ben Rav Shmuel, whose yahrzeit is today. Psiyata Dishmaya the Koyach HaTorah should continuously elevate his neshama of Rav Yaakov ben Rav David ben Rav Shmuel. Psiyata Dishmaya. We're holding on 3 lines from the bottom of Chav Zayin and Mebez in the middle of a fascinating discussion. Can one's sins, averos, affect someone else? Can one be harmed, killed? We've been discussing a parent for a child for a parent, lo yumsu abayis albanim, etc. Begins today's shir with 3 lines from the bottom, and the Gemara begins with a kasha smack in the middle of the sugya from yesterday. Viloi, is it not? Can one not be killed for the avirus of someone else? But says the pasuk, v'chashlu ish be'achiv. One will stumble, a man, over his brother. Ish ba'avoin achiv. That one could stumble because of the avirus of his brother. Milamed she'kulan arevim zebazeh. The classical yisoid of arvos, that everyone is a guarantor for someone else. So ask the Gemara, if you're guarantor one for another, then l'chayra, one could be killed, one could be yumsu for the sins of someone else. Answers the Gemara, no. Hasam shebi adam limchais v'lo yimmichu. Says the Gemara, a very important caveat. When do we say that one could potentially be killed, be harmed for the avirus of someone else? That is bidafka, that is particularly when one had the ability, the unique ability to have changed what the other person did. If one was able to be meicha, he could have protested the act of someone else, and he didn't. That's a different story. Then you could get harmed, you could get killed for the averus of someone else. I think Gemara explains as we move over to Chav Ches Amid Aleph, Ashchan Avos Labanim Ubanim Lavai. So now we've finished explaining how a father's edus for a child and a child edus for a father. The reason why there is a paslos, V'kol shekin, and certainly Avos Lahadadi. Fathers coming from the same father, brothers one for another. But ask the Gemara, banim lebanim, children for each other, cousins in particular. Minalon, from where do we know that they are as well? Pasol eidos. Explains the Gemara, you know why? Because im kain lechlev karliyam zu avois al ben. My banim, why in the plural? That we explain 4 lines down. Even banim, sons who are related to each other, they're attempting to testify one for another. They're cousins. They as well have a paslos of being karayvim. Says the Gemara, Ashkechan, okay. Banim la dadi, banim la alma minalan. Where do we know a banim for other relatives as well? Amar Amar Chama explains Amar Chama Svaruhu. It's a good old-fashioned svara. Kedetanya has learned in a brayso. Ein ha'idim nasin zaymin achizumu shnehem. Gemara Makis, and one eid is not a zaymim, as we've started explaining the aside of imanu ayisem, that if someone is found to be that he couldn't be kashal edus. Why? Because he couldn't have been there. Imanu ayisem. In such a scenario, nasim zaymim achizumu shneim. It's only if both of the edim are found to be zaymim. You're going to tell me that children could testify in our kashal edus for another nimsu eid zaymim neherag beidus achiv. Then we have a zaymim killed as a result of a testimony of his brother. That if two brothers, two relatives, could be Eidim, then what happens if they're found to be Zaymimim? Then they'd both be killed. But says the Gemara, how is that possible? Then we're coming out that there are going to be two different Eidim that are going to be acquitted for the same crime. Says the Gemara, therefore, can't be, it must be that the two relatives cannot join together as Eidim. Amrle Rava, no, what's your ayah? According to your reasoning, Hazit Shloisha Achad, three brothers, Ve'echad, and another one, Mitztaref Imayim, and another one can combine and join with them in order to be Eidos. This is our Gemara Bava Basra. Eidos on a Cheskes Gimel Shanim of a Karka, that someone was in a piece of property for 3 years. Harei Elu Gimel Eiduyos Vehein Eidos Echad. So what comes out? That's 3 different Eiduyos, and they're considered one testimony with regarding Hazama. But if based on what we just said a moment ago, Nimsa Eidzayme Hazama Nimsa Eidzayme Mishali Mamain Beidas Achav. The same kasha, the same reason we were bothered that if we see that these could work for Hazaymimim, then it could come out that two people will be nerag one for another, two brothers, two relatives. Similarly, says the Gemara, it's going to come out they could be Mishali Mamain for the Eidos of one's brother, which of course is impossible. El Hazama me'al Makasi. We must say that Hazama does not come from an aid, but rather it comes from, it does not come from an aid, it comes from someone on the outside. Hachanami Hazama ba'al Makasi has to come from the outside. So says the Gemara, so if that's true, we do not have our source that banim la'alma, that relatives cannot testify for an external person. They cannot be a pair of Eidim. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you what it is. Ben al avais, inami heim al avais, my ubanim. For there we darshan if you banim la'alma. So continues the Gemara, Ashran Karaveyav. Okay, we found relatives to the father, Kravei Minal, and what about the mother, Amar Kra? Says the pasuk, Avais Trei Zimni. The pasuk says Avais 2 times. In Likruveyav, in Likruvei. We don't need them for the father, so utilize them for the mother, and that's how we're going to see the aside that even related maternally will passel leidus. Says the Gemara Ashkechan lechayva. We see these psukim that are saying it's possible from Eidos when it's a chav, when it's a negative, it's a detriment. It's creating a chiyah for a relative. Lezchos minolan. Where do we see that they're also possible Eidos if it's coming to be a benefit, a shvach, a schos for the relative? Amar kra yumsu treis himni. Meaning the chayva teneo inyan lezchos. Ashkam b'din nefashes, b'din imamanis minolan. Where we know this applies also by monetary matters. Amar kra says the pasuk misharech yelachem. Mishvat HaShav. It has to be one level of judgment for all of them, both nefashais and mamanis, capital and civil, monetary, have the same halachais. Amar Rav Acha Abba. Amar Rav, excuse me. Wow, that was ridiculous. Pardon. Amar Rav. Achi Abba lo yo'ili. My father's brother cannot testify for me. Hu ubenoi. Neither he, his son, or his son-in-law. And Afani, says Rav, and even I, lo yani ubanai v'chasani, excuse me, ani ubanai v'chasani. Says the Gemara, why is this true? Shlishi barishain, a son and her son-in-law. Why can they testify for the great uncle? This is a scenario of a shlishi, a third level relative to a rishon, a first level relative. Vanan, and we learn sheni b'sheni tanan, shnei b'rishon tanan, shlishi b'rishon tanan. That's too far distantly related, and says the Gemara that should not create a paslos. Explains the Gemara, my chasanoi tekatani b'masnisa. And what does it mean? Chasanoi chasan b'noi, his son's son-in-law. Therefore, it's not Shlishi Barishan, but rather they're one generation closer. Says the Gemara of Lisni, Ben Binoi. So it should simply say his son's son. Why does it just say Binoi? Explains the Gemara 10 lines from the Y lines. First one line is Milsa. Milsa Gavorche Kamashlan, that what? Debal Ki Ishtoi. That a husband is like the wife when it comes to evaluate the different relatives. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Rav Chia learned there are 8 principal categories, which are 24 cases. But wait, if you're going to tell me that even Shlishi Barishan, even a third level relationship is disqualified, it shouldn't be 24 categories, it should be bumped up 1 level, and it should be 32 cases because it's another whole level of relationship. But rather it says, it means his son-in-law himself. So why was the terminology of the son-in-law of his son, which is where this whole kasha came from, which is where we assumed it's a shlishi risha came? Says the Gemara, Kima de me'alma kasi, since it comes from the outside through marriage, kedar acher dami, it's kilu, it's as if it's another generation, but it's not really a shlishi barishan. Says the Gemara, 1 second, yachi, if it's true, havli shlishi b'sheni, then it bumps up a level. It's a third generation or second generation. V'rav, believe it or not, achshir shlishi b'sheni. So now it shouldn't be possible at all. El Rav, Damar Krav Lazar, the tender of Lazar Aimer, Kishem Sha'achi Abba lo ya'ili hu b'noi v'chasanoi, Kach ben achi Abba lo ya'ili hu b'noi v'chasanoi. Mamish like your Mishnah, and Rav Lazar holds like Rav does, that a Shlishi Barishain, that even a third level and a first level is going to be basal le'idus. It says the Gemara, 1 second, Vakati avishlishi b'sheni. V'rav achshel shlishi b'sheni. Wait, there still is a case of a shlishi b'sheni, and Rav says that's kosher. So how could Rav Lazar be going with Rav? Explains the Gemara, Rav Savla Kavasei b'chada upali galei b'chada. So now that we figured out what Rav holds, ask the Gemara in the second Y line, my time with the Rav, what is his reasoning? Damar kra. Loim su avos albanim banim ubanim. Loy amsu avos albanim ubanim. L'rabbi star acher. That comes to include another generation. Rav Eliezer albanim amar achman absuli da avos shadei albanim. It doesn't mean to add an extra generation. It means just take that apostles and put it on the next level. Vitana tuna. Excuse me. Shadei albanim. Amar Rav Nachman. Continues the Gemara with a din that we learn out from our Mishnah, a new shtickle, 4 lines down. Says Rav Nachman, Achicha Moisai lo ye'eli. My mother-in-law's brother, Achi, the brother of Chamasi, my mother-in-law lo ye'eli, cannot testify for me, and we're realizing these are getting to be distant relationships. Ben Achicha Moisai lo ye'eli. And similarly, 4 lines to the end of the Amid, my mother-in-law is a brother's son. And similarly, case 3, Ben Achois Chamasi lo yoyeli. My mother-in-law's sister's son cannot testify for me. Vitana tuna, and our Mishnah says similarly. That what? Balachais heyu, balachais aviv, balachais imai, heinu b'neim v'chasoneim. So that includes all of these cases. Amar Rav Ashi, 2 lines from the bottom. Ki avinu be'ula. Says Rav Ashi, when we're in the house of Ula Yibailam, we have the following shayla. Achi Chamav Mau. What is the status of a father-in-law's brother? Mau ben Achi Chamav Mau. The son of the father-in-law. Ben Achi Chamav. A father-in-law's brother's son. Ben Achois Chamav. The father-in-law's sister's son. So Amar Ula explains, Amar Lan, says Ula to respond to the last line. Tinitua acha ve'ache ave ve'ache ima hinmanim v'neseim v'chasaneim. They're all included. Rav ikloy Mizvan. Rav came to a place called Mizvan as we turn over to Chav Chesem Beis, and what happened? Gevili. There were parchments over there. Boi minei, and they asked of Rav the following shayla. Say, not Seir. Excuse me. Adim be'ishes chargoi. Can one give eidos over his stepson's wife? Let's see already, we're getting these relations pretty far. It's a stepson. Says the Gemara, Besumri Amru Baal Kishtoi. So it's true, it's your stepson, but it's your wife's son. So it's a step, but Baal Kishtoi. It's mamish that we could say in the surah that a husband is like his wife, and Pumbedisa Amri, no. Isha Kebaila. The wife is like her husband. So says the Gemara, excuse me, and that I said it's no, it's the same side. Both of these are ways of saying husband and wife are one entity, and therefore the relations follow suit, follow over, get translated even through the stepsons. Damar Avuna, Amar Rav Nachman, Menayin Sha'isha Kebayla Dechsev, Ervos Achi Avicha Lo Sigale Al Ishtoi, Velo Sigarev Doidascha He. It's not the Dascha, Michal, the Isha Kebayla. There we see this side that they're really one and the same. And about 8 lines down, we quote the next part of the Mishnah about Ima Yehu Benai Chasinai. Mother's husband, he is son and son-in-law. Says the Gemara, Benai Hainu Achiv. Wait, the mother's husband's son is the same as we saw as Achiv, his own brother. His mother's husband's son is his brother. Amar Rav Yirmiyah Lo Nitzcha El Achi Ha'ach. Says Rav Yirmiyah, we're referring to a brother's brother. Who obviously they're not related to, through meaning the mother's husband's son, which is not his own brother. Rav Chisda says such cases kosher. Did you not hear that which Rav Yirmiyah said? I didn't hear. What does that mean? He argues. Says so we go back to original kasha. If it's not going to come from our Mishnah, then it's the same case as Achiv. Explains Gemara, Tana Achiv, Min Av, Tana Achiv Min Aim. Says Marina Chanami. You're right, it's the same din of Achiv. But there's 2 types of Achiv. There's Achiv Min Av and Achiv Min Ha'im. 4 lines from the Y lines continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Chisda, Avi Chasan v'Avi Kala Me'idin Zelzeh. The father of the Chasan, the father of the Kala, can give edus one about another. V'lo ta'amu la'adadi ella ki achla ledana. They're not connected one to another other than a barrel to something with a not good cover, that even though their children marry, they don't really have a proper relationships. Meaning that they're not actually related. I thought they could be very close. Amar Avachana, Meyed Adam the Ishte Arusa. One give edus to his wife's Arusa. Amar Avina, Lay Amar in the first white line, Alafuki Mine. This is only, says Ravina, Alafuki Mina, to remove money from her. Avalaluyet, give edus law to her, Loy Mehemin. He's not believed, of course, because he is Nagyeh Be'edus, as he's going to get all of his wife's possession after Erison. Continues the Gemara of Lila Loy Mehemin. Says Marvelahi, this isn't true. Whether you're taking money away, whether you're putting money in, the husband does not believe for his wife after Erison. Says the Gemara, what is the reason? If one's wife is after Erison, after the first stages of marriage, after engagement, but of course engagement like Bizman Chazal with Tanayim, the halach is he does not become an einin to her. If he's a kohen, he doesn't become tummy to her. And says Gemara, let's flip it around. She does not become an einin to him, nor does she become tummy for him if she's a bas kohen. Meisa ino yarsha. Meisu gavik subasa. So says the Gemara, what do we see? We see that there are cases that the Arusa is not mamish the ishtoiki gufay of the husband. Answers Gemara, Hasam b'she'erai taloi rachmana. Says the Gemara, not everything is the same. Regarding Yerusha, regarding to Tumah, it all has to do with she'erai, the relationship. When all of the dust settles, they're not really she'erai, they're not a full-fledged relationship. Where it says the Gemara, Hacham misha mekruvei daitahu, over here it has to do with closeness. That's why there's apostles leidos. And after Erison, he feels such a closest. Argoy Levada continues the Gemara 6 lines down. A stepson. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, Chargoy Levadei Rav Yesi Omer Gisai. Rav Yesi says the brother-in-law of Tani Idach Gisai Levadei, the brother-in-law alone is possible. Rav Yehuda Omer Chargoy, my comer. So what exactly is going on? What does Rav Yehuda mean? What does Rav Yesi mean? Says Ilay Mahachi Kamer. This is what it means. Chargoy Levadei Vuadin Legisai, that they all share the same din. If that was to be the case, also Rabbi Yisrael he flips it around. Elamas Nisan Nigadani, our Mishnah says Gisai Hu Banai V'Chaisnai, only by Gisai Davka V'Chaisanai, and their son-in-law. So Mani, who is a go like Rabbi Yossi, doesn't fit with anyone, because they both agree that the Chargoy himself is yes possible. Velachi Kamar says the Gemara, Chargoy levadoi, aval gisai hu benoi v'chasanoi. A Chargoy levadoi, a stepson, is possible, both regard to the gisai hu benoi v'chasanoi, the brother-in-law, he is son, and son-in-law are possible. Also, Rabbi Yossi lemeimar, and comes along Rabbi Yossi to say, gisai levadoi, aval Chargoy hu benoi v'chasanoi. Says the Gemara, if this is true, Velahad Tani Rav Chia Shmona Avos. Rav Chia taught us that there are 8 primary avos shehein, which are how many, as we saw in Amar Aleph Esim V'Arba. Kiman lo Rav Yossi like Rav Yehuda. It follows neither. Elahachi Kamar Chargoy Levadei Avagizu Ubenay V'Chasanei Vas Rav Yossi Lemeimer Gis Levadei Koshkin Chargoy Umasnisa Nizu Rav Yehuda. The Mishnah is Rav Yehuda, Brisa is whom? Rav Yossi. And I'm Rav Yehuda Shmuel. What's the psak? Halacha Rav Yossi. We pass can like Rav Yossi. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from here as the Gemara will continue with stories with this din of Shmuel and Mirza Hashem.